All right. Welcome to the Complete Sinner's Guide. Good morning. It's Saturday, and we're going to have a great conversation. Joining me is my friend here, Chase Orosco. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Yes, sir.
Right on. So, what we intend to discuss today is matter, material, meaning, and storytelling, and some metaphysics. These are topics that perhaps are more popular in the philosophical arena. But as Christians, I think we need to be engaged in some of the things that the world is looking at so that we can be informed and ready to have meaningful discussions with people. And I'm thankful for Chase here to come on and discuss some of these things with me. And I hope that we have a good time. So good morning, Chase. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Just a good Saturday morning here in San Antonio. I wanted to say real quick, last time I was on a couple months ago, a lot of people probably didn't know this, but I was right in the middle of a COVID. I had just gotten COVID that Saturday morning, and I was having
Wow.
I was having a fever like meltdown right in the middle of that interview. And so that was a pretty interesting little ride there. My entire back was all sweaty and everything like that. I was just
Oh, yeah.
pushing through that, but that was just I just thought I would mention that. I thought it was kind of funny to think about, as I was getting back on here with you guys. Or
Well,
with
you
you.
hit it well. I think that you hit it pretty well.
Yeah, I was doing my best not to like give off the impressions like, oh, I'm dying over here, But yeah, so I had to get. It was the following morning. I was eating breakfast and I realized I can't taste my breakfast, and I was like, oh,
Oh,
I think I got COVID. So I had to text my mom. I was like, I think I need a COVID test. So I got a COVID test, and yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty rough, but it was positive and it was fun. Good times, good times. But yes, it's good to be back, and I am feeling much better today than I was last time. Yes.
fantastic. Praise
Yeah.
God. That's great, man. Yeah, I honestly I did not have any inclination to think that you were ill while we were talking. Maybe a bit tired, but I wouldn't have guessed that. So good
Oh
on you,
yeah.
man. You
Yeah.
got some good nerves of steel going on.
It
But
was tough. It was tough, but yeah.
yeah. So before we went live, we were talking about something that I think is kind of a cool segue into this discussion. You were talking about encouraging a young storyteller to take up that habit and that passion to try to emerge that a little bit more. Can
Mhm.
you recapitulate some of that, because that I think that was a really great segue into the conversation.
Yeah. So, as we were talking about last time I was on the program, I love storytelling. When I read scripture, I read it like a story, and with all the plot elements going on, the character arcs going on, and everything like that. So it's just the way I see things, and I see scripture. I see our own stories, and I love to write stories. But I was talking to this kid at church who's reminded me a lot of myself because very introverted, very much like very artistic. She likes to draw these little pictures, and she has this character. It's like an acorn character. It's just like a little acorn, and I don't remember what she calls him, but she was talking about how he's a side character in her little comics that she makes.
Mm.
And but then she told me that she likes like him a lot more than the main character. And I thought that was kind of fascinating. I was like, because she's talking about him more than, apparently she didn't even mention the main. I don't even know who the main character is. She's just talking about, yeah, she was just talking about the side character. And then I was like, it sounds to me like your side character is your main character, because if you're more interested in the side character, that's going to become your main character, And so she kind of was thinking about that, like, oh, I guess so, And I was like, but I thought it was kind of fascinating, and I wanted to ask her. I didn't get, well, hopefully I can ask her, because I was thinking about this yesterday. I was like, she's kind of, again, like me. She tends to sort of just kind of fade into the background where everybody's talking at church and stuff like that. She'll just kind of sit with her little journal, and she's just writing or drawing and stuff like that. And again, sort of fades into that backdrop, kind of like what a support character might do. And so I thought, maybe that's kind of the way she sees herself a little bit, kind of like that sort of side character, just sort of along for the ride, not really a central element of a story. And maybe that's why you're more interested in this other character that you created. So I just
Mm.
thought that'd be kind of cool I was thinking about asking her that, and I might ask her that, and all because I want to, like we were talking about, encourage, especially our younger generation, to think more about why they do things and why they behave in the ways that they behave. Why do you have more interest in the side characters than even the main characters? Maybe because that character reflects a little bit about who you are and how you see yourself.
Mhm.
And so, those are things that I thought about when I look back now. Look, that much about it, when I was a kid. Now that I'm older, I look back and I reflect on a lot of that stuff, and maybe that is the reason why I was the way I was. It just kind of makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's just kind of, I want to try and encourage whenever I want to, like, telling her, like, hey, if you got making these little comic characters, I want to read them. I want to see them. I want to encourage you in this little path that you're going, because that's kind of how I started. Just making these little comic characters, and you may end up making some really great characters and great books with a Christian worldview perspective, and we need a lot more of that. And so I'm like, I want to encourage that more and more and more. Just dive into that. Don't be ashamed of that, and to show that young person, anybody, that I'm interested, I'm invested in that element, because it's not invested in enough, and especially in our young folks, that's a great thing to pursue and desire. So, just that's kind of what we were talking about a little bit.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question then, because I don't know this person. Is two things: are they an only child or are they a middle child?
They're kind of a middle child. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say, because that maps on pretty well actually to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how much that kind of persona can be identified. Are you an only child?
Me? No. I have siblings. I have an older brother, half brother, a younger sister, and a younger brother.
So you're a bit of a middle child too.
Yeah. So I can relate there as well. My sister's a lot like me. It's kind of sort of reserved. My two brothers, though, total opposites of me. They're love I got a lot of energy, love the attention and stuff, and all that stuff. So yeah.
I'm pretty extroverted too. I'm actually I'm the youngest. I have one older sister. My mom is kind of the community mom. So I have a lot of siblings.
Yeah.
But I really have one older sister, and I'm the baby, and so I have let's say a rather showboaty, extroverted kind of personality in that way. But I can understand the anxiety that would drive somebody to be a little bit more reserved and have that kind of like, I'll watch and then I'll speak up if I want to, but I'm just gonna watch. You know what I mean? I totally get that, because I find a good enjoyment in people watching and just patiently being in the room without having to be the center of it. But I can definitely occupy the center, that's for sure.
I'm cool with that. That. Yeah.
Right on. Well, I really love that encouragement for the younger generation to come out and invest their creativity and their talents, because it's not like there's a lot of things that are tending us toward investing those talents and creativity. One of the other things we were talking about before we jumped on live is this like microwave dinner version of entertainment that's coming out now, where everything is short form videos and cartoons don't have a plot anymore. They just try to be as random as possible. And, adult shows really don't have much to say anymore. They're not writing new stories. What they're doing is inverting old ones for the shock factor. And it's just, there's not a lot of creativity bubbling out there right now. And it's kind of getting buried in the fact that we're so entertained that nobody has these spells of boredom that really brought out the inventiveness of prior generations. And so it's really encouraging to see that some younger people are doing creative enterprises. And, I've actually been, this technically isn't on the outline that I sent you, but I'm kind of curious about your thoughts of, one of the things that's been bugging me lately is the fact that we have these AI generated stories, AI generated, I typed this into a robot and it made me a script, or they have those AI generated imageries and photos anymore that are coming out now that a lot of people are really interested in, it seems like. But I've noticed that when they type in their prompts to get these things from AI, it's either a joke or it's actually about metaphysics. They're asking a robot what they should be asking a pastor or a priest, which I
Mhm.
find to be very troubling.
Mhm.
But also the fact that it's the creative and artistic enterprises that people are really interested in seeing a robot undergo. And so it's like, what do you think are like, this is kind of off the cuff, so it's okay if you can be like, no, I have to think about it. Like, what do you think are the implications of human intuition for creativity being kind of swallowed up in our need for technology that way?
That is definitely an interesting question. What was the question again?
Basically, like seeing the way that AI has become a more popular
Hmm.
kind of means of seeing, let's say, creativity being displayed. Like there's, AI generated artwork, there's AI
Right.
generated stories and storytelling,
Mm.
and things like that. Is this obviously at this point it's not as much of a danger as it could be, but I see the tendency of technology being something that both helps and harms, and I'm
Yeah.
seeing the entertainment and the shock value and maybe the novelty. But I'm thinking on the back end, what would it be like if human intuition and creativity were swallowed up by technology?
Well, my immediate thought would be that it ruins humanity itself. At the end of the day, again, what we were just talking about, that with this young person at my church, and then just what so many human beings have done for centuries is creating stories or creating anything really, just that human imagination that has developed the Western world and stuff would be substituted for robots and things that don't have imaginations. They're artificial. They don't actually think. They're programmed, and therefore it allows us to no longer contemplate our own intuitions, no longer explore our creativeness, that image of God that we have within us,
Hmm.
because God creates, and we have that image of God within us, and so there is that inclination, that desire to create as well. That eventually will, I think, my prediction would be, I haven't really honestly explored a lot of that stuff. I've heard about it, but I haven't really like looked into it. Like artificially generated story, that seems kind of like pointless, but like, why would you want to do that? It's if you write a story, but you write it, it's your story. It's not somebody else's story. It's not something else's story or anything like that. But my immediate thought is just that there's going to be less and less human beings, just like with the way we're automating almost everything now. You got your automated little vacuum cleaners that go around. That's obviously very convenient. I've never had one before, but you think about it like long term, like what if you had like these automatic lawn mowers or something like that? Lawn mowing can be quite a workout, especially at my old house. We had an actual hill in the
Yeah.
backyard. You have to push that sucker up the hill. It's a good little workout, but if you had like an automatic lawnmower, then you're not really doing that hard work anymore. That kind of toughens you up and helps you, if you just have all of this automated, then we just kind of sit and we do nothing and we just rot.
Right.
So I think the same problem could happen with storytelling. You're never really thinking and exploring things, and that kind of stuff. So
And I think you're right. I think there's something to be said about the growth that humans specifically experience because of adversity and
mhm.
difficulty. Like if you were to take all difficulty away and add nothing but convenience in its place,
Yeah.
I feel like what we'd have to do is just kind of break everything to see something interesting happen, because we couldn't deal with that.
Oh yeah.
That kind of world would make us insane, you know. But the way that this all kind of sparked for me was I was seeing these online. There's kind of this trend going on right now where people are posting pictures that they got from AI generated artwork,
Yeah.
and they would type in certain pre-selected prompts that they have and say, okay, I want to see a picture of God and heaven, right? And it's like they're typing in pictures, they're typing in ideas, but a lot of the ideas that I've seen that people are posting that are, let's say, the most impressive versions of those pictures are not pictures of, let's say, a sandwich or a bus stop. It's pictures of, I want to see heaven, I want to see John the Baptist, I want to see um like just these metaphysical, like biblically oriented, often spiritually oriented pictures. One of the ones that frightened me the most, I can say, was it said latent home. And it was basically, it looked like something that you would see coming from like a horror movie, right? Where like the home was made of skulls and none of the edges were defined. They were all clouded. And it was like, wow, latency, like really, like all the potential's there, but it's not a home. It was actually like death that they were putting into the, it was just really very kind of disturbing. But I think that there's a danger in kind of, you know, burying human creativity. And we have this creativity. It's obvious that we're drawn to it because we're like, oh, I want to see artwork. I want to listen to music. It's like, imagine what happened to music over the last 30, 40 years when electronic instruments became a thing that supplanted, let's be honest, they supplanted the human element of accident and creativity for something that could be really clean and refined. And that clean and refined sound can be impressive. And I'm not saying that producers don't play a role, because those people have some skill, right? But there's also something I'm a drummer, right? And I know you play guitar. It's like there's something really special about the human element that comes into human expression through music, through art, through story. And if we lose that human element because we're trying to supplant it with technology, primarily for convenience and, let's say, perfectionism, let's say, it's like, I think we're losing something bigger than just that human element, right? Like our creativity and our intuition is what in our mind helps us to reach forward and grab things that we don't yet have. It's like you look at the way that theologians and philosophers were able to explain things. It was always subsequent to the artist. The artist always got there first. You know, and I have this kind of like, in a world where material rules and science is the highest form of truth, human intuition and human experience has kind of been discredited and almost discarded. And I find that to be something that's a little bit more troubling than a lot of other people seem to be bothered by. But as a storyteller, I think you hit it on the head. It's like, what happens to humans when you take that away and you give them the convenience of something creating this thing, you know, and then you're like, okay, maybe that's entertaining. It's like, yeah, but is it meaningful? Did it strike your soul? Right? Like you were talking about the main character, the side character, that kind of distinction where you find part of your identity in this thing. How is a machine supposed to supplement that?
Exactly. That's another great point. You know, like I don't think, again, I haven't explored the subject too much, but automated storytelling, I've only heard about it. And so my thinking is like, how can a machine, because a story is supposed to have a purpose. There's supposed to be meaning in the story. It's supposed to be telling you something. Like, you know, I would say the overarching biblical story is redemption and reconciliation with God. That's like the overarching idea of it, you know, that broken relationship being restored. And how is a machine, what's the machine giving you for a purposeful meaning? It's just kind of, I would imagine it's just giving you something random, just here's my story, and like what's the point of it? What are you trying to tell me with this story? Which is an element that is lost on us. And that even goes, again, like you were just talking about music, goes back to music. Like a lot of music today is just so automated. We were talking in the shop yesterday about some of those hip hop songs that were coming on, and even the voices are like kind of auto-tuned and everything. And then I'm like, you know, he's just talking about money and stuff like that. You know why there's no such thing as classics anymore? It's because this stuff's forgettable. There's nobody. You like it for like 2 weeks, and then you're moving on to the next thing. You know, we still listen to a lot of the 80s songs, which I'm getting tired of personally, but I know why people love them, because they're classics. You know, there's like a meaning to those songs, and you can feel it in the song itself. And like a lot of the music that I listen to, when I listen to the piano playing and stuff, like I've been listening to some classical stuff with like a beautiful piano piece, and you can just tell there's humanity behind that piano, because he kind of hits some notes very lightly, you know, but then some of them he hits them really hard. You know, it's like you can just tell there's a human being there's emotion, there's passion there when he's playing, or he or she, whoever. And when you can just automate that stuff, it it kind of takes away that human element. And it is the same with storytelling. When you just take away the human element to it, there's a part of it that is all that dies with it. It's that, like, the heart of it is taken out with it. It's just something.
Yeah.
It's just like a automated brain, just working without a heart, with it. It's just, yeah,
Men
absolutely.
without chests, as Lewis would say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, which brings me actually to our original talk was going
Yeah.
to be specifically about
Perfect
matter and
segue.
metaphysics.
Yeah.
And so, like, looking at the way that the human experience and this kind of emotive presence of humanity and their creativity and stuff, it's like seeing how that expands out into storytelling at large, modern stories, right? Like, imagine the depth of the stories that came out, let's say even 100 years ago, right? Like, we're coming up on what, 80 years since Lewis was writing the space trilogy and Tolkien was writing the Rings, and George Orwell was writing the about Big Brother in 1984. It's like that stuff had some deep human intuition to look forward and see what was coming. The art, like I said, the artists get there first. They were able to look forward and see what was coming. And they had that deep intuition. And I think the fact that we are so constantly entertained and we don't have those dry spells of boredom,
Yeah.
right? We don't have those quiet sit down and just think, right? Like, what kind of crazy anxiety comes out of a person that can't just sit down and think? It's torturous for your mind to not be able to formulate things and put things in their place and make these categories. It's like all the categories that we want to see have to be disconnected from human experience. And we think that, we have crazy catchphrases that come out, like from Ben Shapiro: facts don't care about your feelings. Well, like, I think that there's something to be said about that. Yeah, truth can be objective and so forth, yada yada. But really, who are you talking to? A machine?
Yeah.
Or are you talking to a person?
Yeah.
Because our feelings seem to care about the facts, whether the facts have feelings at all. We're not perfectly logical creatures. We're emotive ones.
Yeah.
And if you're going to hit somebody's heart and explain to them, let's say the gospel, right? And you're trying to explain to them, this is what happened. You're not going to simply lay out historical factoids and expect that to hit their heart, right? So what is it about story, like for you, the author? What is it about your story that you're like, this part I think should hit the heart, right? I'm not just like explaining the setting or explaining a time frame, and like, it's like, because you can hear a boring story. So you wake up, I woke up, I began to breathe more regularly, and then I moved my feet a few inches to the left. I dropped my foot, the bottom of my foot impacted the floor. That is a boring story and nobody cares.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you get somebody to care about your story?
Well, that's a great question, and the simple answer is to understand the difference between showing and telling. When you're obviously, you got to do a little bit of both. Again, we don't want to, like, have an imbalance where we just, obviously we're talking about our problems with just the brain and not the heart. But you also don't want to just have no brain going on. But so there's points where you got to tell, but showing is like a very important element of storytelling, because it's what it does is it pulls the reader not just in, like you were just talking about, into a boring story of just exposition, but like how this character is feeling and how they what's going on with them in their mind. So if we can go back real quick to what I was mentioning at the beginning of the show here today, when I was running a fever last time. If in a story I was expressing a character running a fever, if I just said, and Jim was having a fever, that's not really, that's just exposition.
It's
But
fact.
if I started, it's fact, it's fact, but it doesn't tell you how Jim is feeling.
Right.
If I said, Jim, or just Chase, let's just say Chase. If Chase his back was sweating, his heart was pounding, he couldn't sit still in his chair. He felt the wind hitting him on one side and the sun just beaming on him on the other side. You start expressing stuff like that. you're really pulling the character, the audience into how the character is feeling in that moment. And one of the ways I have, like in my story, I have instances where characters are anxious. They have an anxiety going on, but I don't just tell the audience, well, so and so was very anxious. I try to show that how are they acting, how are they behaving. They can't sit still. They're walking around. They're fiddling with their hands and stuff like that. They're constantly they do these things where they're just they just can't sit still. And I'll even talk about what's going on in their minds. Their mind, they can't settle on one single thought. They're just constantly going, what if this, what if that, this, that, and the other, just to express that emotion that they're feeling. Because there is more to us than just the logic. There is more to us than just the brain. That we have emotions. We have, even men, we have emotions, and sometimes that clouds our ability to think. And I like to have characters who are being human. Not always are those actions good. Sometimes they make mistakes, but you understand why they did it in a sense, because they were in a desperate situation, kind of thing like that, and that's just a way to express more than just a construct, or more than just a plot element, but a real human being. And I think scripture shows that a lot too. And that's one of the reasons why that's one of the things I like to tell people about the authenticity of scripture, is how you just watch how these characters behave. They don't act in these mythological, heroic ways. A lot of the human beings who are scared, doubtful, they make mistakes.
There's definitely a human element all through scripture. That's for sure.
Yes. And sometimes they don't know what to think about this, what they're seeing before their very eyes. They're terrified. Abraham, when Abraham lies to I think it was the king of, what was it, the Pharaoh?
Pharaoh,
yeah, Pharaoh. He's lying to Pharaoh about Sarah, because he doesn't, he's terrified for his own life. He doesn't want to get in serious trouble with this guy. So he's like, hey, let's just lie real quick here. It's no big deal, right? That kind of stuff. But like I can see myself doing something like that to try to get myself out of a really bad situation, and I've done it many times where I didn't trust God, instead I just kind of, but again, that point being is that there's a human element with these characters, and you can read that, and you can see something of yourself. If you're really being serious about scripture, you can identify with these characters that aren't just characters, but they're human beings. They're real people who think and have emotions.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The portion, especially the part where the emotive experience isn't just listed as a fact. It's something that you try to make embodied for the reader.
Exactly.
So that they can have that identity overlap with this person. Because again, we're humans. We live in the human embodied platform. We've never lived in another one. And that's how we understand the world. It's like, for all intents and purposes, the world is not made of stuff. The world is made of human experience first. And I think that's why one of the reasons why the materialistic worldview that tries to cast, and even let's say that I'll be honest with you, a lot of modern apologetics makes the same mistake. We cast human experience and emotion completely to the side, if not discredit it entirely, and pretend like, no, it's just the facts. I'm a machine. I've never had experiences, and even if I have, I pretend like I don't have them because they're not evidence of anything. They don't come into my rationality because I'm a rational being and I think like a scientist. It's like, yeah, usually not though. Like, you don't. To be honest with you, I don't. I'm a very emotive person. I get really passionate. I'm a very excitable person. I also have a deep empathy. Like when I was a kid, to be honest with you, I saw the need for justice in stories when bad guys would do bad guy things.
Yeah.
But my heart ached and I didn't like to see the punishment and justice dealt out to the bad guys. I would cry for bad guys when I was a kid, right? Like as an adult, I can still cry for bad guys. But I live in a world of shades of gray where I notice I'm one of the bad guys. And so there's a bigger reason for me to have that empathy and share that experience with them, right? If I'm honest and I look at the darkest parts of me, I know what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
Right. Or at least I can see the shadow of what I'm capable of. And it makes me more ready to mourn for somebody who is acting evilly or having twisted thoughts and so forth. And being, let's say, maybe even logical
Yeah.
but they kill the humanity inside themselves, and they act without emotion, without feeling, without care, without a connection to other people. They're not relational, right? And it's like, I mourn for that person in a way that's different than the person who's just acting irrationally because they're emotive.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah. And um, it kind of reminds me of some things that I've noticed in a lot of people who are, like do like critics of storytelling or whatever, good or bad. Um, Something I've noticed is you have the standard character archetype of, like a heroic character or whatever, a brave, very brave character. Um, and these days, in today's day, people want more than just the standard. Like, you have either the heroic character or you just have the comic relief character kind of thing like that. They kind of like fulfill these standard character types. Again, they're not really human. They're just sort of plot elements to push the plot forward rather than making real human characters. Appreciate is that people want more than that. They want a character who is much more than just like a one dimensional kind of character. And so when I talk about, let's make characters who are much more interesting, a way to that I try to explain that is to take a standard character type, like the heroic character, the one who's very brave. He's just takes problems head on. He loves justice, and then add a caveat to it. He's heroic and brave, except for something. One thing holds him back. All of a sudden,
Mm.
he's like totally different. He seems like a totally different person. And I know some people think, well, that's a contradictory kind of thing. In one sense, it is. But again, he's human. We're all human. In reality, we're all inconsistent in many different ways.
Yeah.
I'm a very, like I said, I'm a very quiet. I'm usually not a very confrontational person, but there are some things where suddenly I'm just, hey, wait, all right, we gotta this isn't gonna work, kind of thing like that. Where just all that stuff changes, and it's like I've thought about these things. Like, why is that? And it's just it's because, and we talk about these issues, especially when it comes to characters and stories, as if like that's contradictory, as if this character is supposed to be like just a programmed thing,
Right.
and that
Yeah.
they're supposed to behave in this way, and if they behave in any other way, well, that's just contradictory. That can't fit that character, but it can sometimes, because in real life, it's a lot of that way. I mean, people talk about a lot of the characters of history who are, and hopefully I don't catch a lot of flack for this, but people talk about Hitler being the worst man in all of history, and I'm like, man, there's been much worse guys than Hitler. Hitler's bad, but there's been much worse guys.
Yeah.
And
Even in
honestly,
his century.
yeah, even in his century, I would say Stalin was much worse than Hitler. But
Hmm.
uh, but like I've read a lot about Hitler, and I've thought, this is a guy who was a terrible human being. But if I just met the guy, I could probably, he'd be a little strange, but he has mannerisms. He has love and care and concern for some people, and that, by the way, is one of the reasons why I really like that show on Netflix, Arcane, League of Legends. I don't know if you've watched that show, but it's a
Mm-mm.
great show. It's a great show because like the main bad guy in that show, you start to like not like him, you hate him, but towards the end of it, you see his humanity, that he cares for somebody, and he's driven.
Mhm.
You kind of feel sorry for him in the end. Like I know what you just told me about you and bad guys and stuff, that you're gonna feel really bad for this guy. So you're probably
Mm.
gonna cry. But that's really important, is that we are more than just these constructs, these just made up of these basic character traits. And if I can just say one more real quick thing, when it came to creating characters, I was looking up a lot of stuff on how to do this, how to make memorable, meaningful characters. I
Mhm.
saw many different kinds of advices, but a lot of the advice I was seeing was just basically, well, what you got to do is you got to make this list of all the character. You got to basically create this list of what your character is, their likes, their dislikes, and blah 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 blah. What kind of music do they like, and this, that, and the other thing. It's just this list, and you're just reducing a person to uh, like just a list of things about them. And then I saw another one that I liked a lot more. Instead of doing that, spend time with your character, as in get to know this character more. just let them sort of flesh themselves out and see, instead of seeing them like an organized list of things, but as just sort of sometimes a bit of a mess and just a jumbled mess of things and complicated. They got some issues going on and stuff, and they have an inner struggle with this, that, the other thing. And that really, I think, is much better. When you meet new people, you don't sit there with a notepad and you're just listing off what they like. You're talking to that person. And every time you're talking, even on the camera, I'm looking right at you on my screen because I want to see because that facial expression, like you guys are talking about with that last program with the Eden one, there's the humanity is expressed in the face, and so you're looking at them right in the face, and that's what I do when I'm talking to somebody. I don't want to just see what you're saying to me. I want to see if there's something emotional about it, that really grips you, when you're talking to me, and that's why when I write my stories, I'm having dialogue with characters. I try to also express what they're doing and the facial expressions that they have to sort of show that they're not just talking, but there's a humanity there to these people, so.
Yeah. Well, I what I really like, and I know that you also are a fan of C.S. Lewis, and in his fiction writing, one of the things that I really, really care for is the fact that he will, in fact, introduce not only like facial expression, body language, things like that. What he does is also integrate the sense data of the character he's describing. He says what they feel with their body, with their sensations, right? He says what they smell. He says the colors and brightness of the things that they see. The warmth of the air around them and how it feels going in and out of their mouth and things like that. It's like those things. Those are things that we can really understand and embody. And when you can embody something, like when you're reading, right? Let's say you read something, and I don't know if you're like me, but in my head, I'm dramatizing. And then in some sense with my body, I begin to think and do some of the things that character is doing. And those really help me to, like you said, identify with that character. And it's not like when you're reading a book, you can see their face. But yes, you can see their face because, there's the part of you that we call your imagination, right, is capable of building, let's call them avatars of selves, right? Yeah. And you can kind of populate your imagination with these people, and giving enough of that sense data and that kind of, physical form, the expression on the face, the shape of the mouth, the shape of the eyes and the upper cheeks, like those kind of things, like, when somebody, like, you can see, if I were to cover my face and smile, right, like you can still see from here. Right. I have smiling eyes is what they would call that. Right. Those are the kind of eyes that I have because my eyes aren't very big and open. Like they're kind of like closed. I have closed lids, and so but I have jolly cheeks like Santa. And so when I smile, you can see my smile, not only here, but the whole face is a smile.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a real one. Like if you actually make somebody happy or smile, you can see even through their eyebrows the expression of what it is that you brought out in them, right?
Yeah.
And it's like what you're seeing is more than their physical person in front of them.
Exactly.
What you're getting is a glimpse into part of their identity expressing itself, and that's bigger.
Yeah, and that's also when I try to express characters' reactions to this, that, and the other thing. When they smile, how they smile though. Like sometimes I'll just say, he smiled a bright smile, or his smile bloomed, like that's like a big smile. Like, oh, he's really impressed with that. Like, and then there's like that half-hearted smile where they're kind of just smiling with the lower part, but their eyes, like you said, usually a authentic smile will affect the entire face, including the eyes. But if it doesn't affect the eyes, it's probably a fake smile. It's kind of like that, it's a very sort of passive aggressive smile. And then he might curl his lips up. I'll try to like describe that. Curling his kind of, the lips are inside the mouth a little bit. Like it's like almost like he's withholding the smile while trying to pull it out at the same time, but that it conveys sort of like, okay, something's going on there, like he didn't like that statement for some reason, and then again, that's just ways to pique the audience's interest and going, what's going on there, sort of thing like that. But you can also smile even as you're talking. As I'm talking, I've kind of got a smile on my face, but you can just see it in the whole face, sometimes it's not just with the mouth, it's the face, what you see, and so, yeah, definitely.
We got a comment in the chat here that I want to bring up. Is from Tell Me the Truth. I like that name, by the way. That's pretty rad. He said, in my opinion, the importance of these things for Christians is to understand that the first grounding principle, the archetype for all metaphysical realities, all transcendental categories, logical laws, and reason included, is Christ, the Logos, the second person of the Godhead incarnate, through whom all things were made. I think that's important, and I think you're right. Thank you for writing that. But also, I think that that's where the rubber meets the road, is that each of us are sharing in that humanity and that human platform that Christ, in fact, took on to himself in the incarnation. Christ had a face. Christ had a smile. Christ had an expression of his identity displayed on his person, right? And to know, when you read the Gospels, sometimes it's lost on us because we like to think about the historicity of things and we're not thinking about it as a narrative necessarily. But you're reading those stories, and I call them stories not pejoratively. They are stories telling you something, right? It's like you can meet the person of Christ, and though they don't give you those explicit details about, the shape of his eyebrows or any of those kind of things, I think the fact that his face is left undescribed is something that actually helps you to be able to identify with him even further than you would through any mere individual, so that you can see him in all individuals when you meet them. Right? Like you can see the expression of the Logos in all people. Like he said, it's the metaphysical grounding. It's like, this is where all of those parts of you that aren't made of matter, that's why they matter, which is a weird way of saying that, right? Matter matters, right? The stuff that your face is made of can matter to me because I can read in it something more than the matter. It's meaning. There's something displayed on your face that's more than just the pieces that make it in front of me, right? Like the more than the solidity of your skin or whatever. And there's something about you that displays identity and value to me that I can identify with, right? Now let's say we'll make this really biblical for a second and talk about the idea of good and evil, right? If I can see you, I can identify with you, I can feel with you or for you. Now I have a capacity to do good for you and to you in a way that I couldn't if I couldn't recognize your person. I can anticipate a need. I can see a desire. I can see a passion or something displayed in your words, in your face, that make me say, oh, this person would really benefit, or like this would help them. This would bring happiness to them if I did X, Y, and Z. And on the opposite end of that coin, if I don't have the empathy that I was saying that I have toward villains and toward heroes and people in general, if you don't have a deep empathy, you also can't be a very successful villain, because to be a villain, you really have to kind of also know, I know what would really hurt you. Right?
Yeah.
Because I can feel that. I refuse for me to feel it, but I would know what it would hurt you. And as soon as I know what would hurt you, I can really do evil that goes beyond just tragedy, like a hurricane or whatever, and bring something more than a hurricane, more like a Holocaust, right? That's only possible because of something like empathy, right? To be able to feel the other person, to be able to understand that their identity is displayed, to know that this is telling you about something more than their physical makeup or whatever. And I think that that's one of those things that, if I'm honest, I'm not sure that atheism has a sufficient explanation for not the biology of your face, but the meaning behind it. Try to reduce everything to a psychological phenomena, but really there's something that goes, I think there's something that goes past that pushes past that psychological explanation, or neurological explanation in your brain, like the amygdala experiencing negative emotion and flagging it as trauma or whatever. It's like there's something bigger than that happening when I recognize your person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's it's one of the reasons why you see these, when we see these new robot AI things that have faces and everything like that to them, and you're talking to it, it's actually just kind of creepy more than anything. It's not actually, because it's not real. It's not a human being. It's all artificial, and we can always see right through that. That's one of the, and so that that's one of the reasons why robots can never, no matter how sophisticated they may become, truly embody what makes us human. And it's not the physical makeup even though that matters, like you said, it still matters, because in the physical world sort of expresses who and what we are. Like our essence sort of in a sense shines through in our physicality.
Yeah.
And so there's this you, and I think if you were to talk about things like the hypostatic union, it kind of, it has something to do with that Jesus is truly God, truly man. The Son is in Christ, and he's expressing things true like himself in Christ, and but in a way that we can't truly, you cannot reduce it to, because when you try to do that kind of stuff, that's where you end up in bad places. That's why the church just confesses he's truly God, truly man. Well, how does that work? Well, we don't really know how it works. There's just a mystery going on with this relationship between the physical and the spiritual, but it's there. It's truly there and so, like you said, in atheism, you don't, because I would say consistent atheism. I don't think a lot of atheists really do this. I think they might want to call themselves more like agnostic, but like, a lot of atheists tend to act very spiritual, and be sort of acknowledge a lot of spiritual stuff. I've listened to a lot of Joe Rogan where he sounds like he kind of does that, but he still calls himself an atheist. And I think consistent atheism would lead you to materialism, would lead you to a very reductionistic view. And so it can't explain, these things can't explain why, I get these beautiful sunsets here where I live. I have like this, I can literally see west as far as you can gorgeous sunsets almost every single day. I'm not here every time they happen, but still I get them every single day. And it's beautiful. We look at these sunsets and we just think, oh, it's just so gorgeous. And we take all these pictures of them and everything like that. But why? What is it about that is beautiful?
Right.
Because it can't be just the thing itself, because all that is just a big giant ball of gas, 9 million, what is it, 9 million miles away, something like that. I'm not too familiar with the specifics, but it's, just a big old ball of gas that would burn you up if you get, not even too close, like just any closer than what we are to it right now, it would get pretty warm. But it's all it is, a ball of gas. And what are clouds but just, what are they in the sky? It's just
atmospheric pressure and all that.
Atmospheric pressure and all that stuff. And then I read somewhere that the reason why you get the glow you have on a sunset, the burning red, it's again, it has a lot to do with the atmosphere and everything like that. I can never retain this information whenever I read it, but that's all what's really happening, though. At the end of the day, when you look at the stars at night, again, just balls of gas in the sky. It's all it really is. But nobody wants to look at it like that. You see something much more going on there. Like if you're, no matter who you are, if you just sat down, put your phone down, just stop, just go and
put the phone down.
Yeah, put the phone down, and you just watch a sunset for a while, and you just, man, I haven't done this in a while, and there's something, like, you feel something going on inside of you, and suddenly you want to think about things that are more meaningful. Materialistic things don't do that. There's something more there, even though it is true that it is just a ball of gas in the sky, but something is being like conveyed through that to you. Something's communicating to you. And if you want to think about it in an analogy, it's like radio signals. Radios, tower, they receive a signal from something. Sometimes you don't know exactly what it is, but it's something. It's kind of like we have that when it comes to the spiritual. Like, human beings have this sort of contact with the metaphysical, something that's beyond us. And
I would call that meaning making. You're able to perceive. This is the thing. I've had conversations before with my friend Richard Suttles, the Faithiest Atheist. Shout out Richard. But he was on that episode that we did about the cosmic structure of Eden. Also, by the way, anybody who hasn't seen the cosmic structure of Eden discussion we did, check it out. It's awesome. It's on the channel for Complete Sinner's Guide on YouTube. We're going to do a part 2 next Saturday, so looking forward to that. Please check out that first part before you listen to the second part, though, or you're going to be lost on its context. Anyway, Richard, I had a conversation with him about something that he's passionate about. He has a background in I guess he called it counterterrorism, where he's encountered, let's say, the religious element of man in a guise that makes it obvious that zealotry can be a real danger, right?
Yeah.
And so, from what I understand, it is the inhumane parts of humanity that make religion almost not livable, not real to him.
Right.
But I think that the way that he explains that, because he talks about zealotry as being these different categories of how you interact with the world, you're going to have passions, and one of them is going to be the top passion, right? And he says that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I would agree, but I think it has more to do with what you're talking about, this metaphysical connection that humanity has with the visible and the invisible parts of reality, right? There's four things that I think the universe is made of, and if you put them in the order that a theist or a Christian, let's say, would put them in, they're actually the inverse of the order that a materialist would put them in. The materialist would say the first thing you interact with is material reality, right? And then numerical abstraction. And then from those things, you can derive and input subjectively a meaning and a purpose onto reality, right? Those are the four things that you're interacting with. From a materialist, those four things are in that order: material, then material abstraction becomes numerical, right? Where you can do math and calculate and things like that. And then from there, you can subjectively, project, let's say, meaning and intelligibility onto the universe from within you, which makes it less factual than material reality and numbers, because numbers are more fundamental to them. However, I think that order is actually reversed. The first thing you interact with in the universe as a human person is always meaning. And from meaning, you can derive purpose. And then we can use mathematical abstraction to interplay with those things and create new parts of material reality, because that's the last thing that the universe is made of, is material. The first thing it's made of is meaning, right?
Yeah.
That's the first thing you interact with always. And so I think that the way that humans are able to interact with the meaning of things rather than just its material compositions. Like you said, you look at a sunset, the last thing on your mind is the temperature of the sun.
Yeah.
Unless it's really hot out. And then
Yeah.
you're thinking about the temperature of the air around you, really. But you almost blame it on the sun in a direct way, that you're not thinking about the causal relationship. You're thinking about what the sun means. The sun means day. The sun means morning. It means evening. It means heat. It means life. It means light. It means all of those things, right? And it's like, okay, but the sun is made of something specific. It functions in a certain way materialistically. But what does it mean to you, the human? It means regular sleep cycles. That's what it means, right? It means the fact that, let's go back to a mythic way of viewing this. The ancient world would have said the sun is personified, right? In the way that the scripture in Genesis 1 says, he made a greater ruler for the day and a lesser ruler for the night. And that's the sun and the moon. These are personified for some reason. Like, why? Well, if you think about it, what's happening is actually an expression of something much bigger than the material reality. The persona of the sun glides across the sky, and then at night it goes underneath the earth, right? And it's like, what is it doing there? Well, the ancients would have thought it was fighting the Leviathan or something, right? And every morning it would come out triumphant again and return. The sun would return. It's like, wow, that's an incredible gospel element displaying itself every morning and every night. So much so that Christ said, you're used to this. You're used to this. You see the signs in the clouds. You can see the regularity around you, and you can guess these things, but you don't understand who I am. Right. And then he made something that really hits home. It's like a promise, right? I think that we can condense the promise of Christ's return into something like, you should trust that you should have more faith in the return of Christ than you do in sunrise. Which is saying something really much different than the Earth's rotation will become evident at this time next, in 12 hours, whatever. Like, we're not talking about that at all anymore. The return of the sun, right? The SUN and the SON, and the analogous meaning between those two things. And as a Christian, that's an immeasurably deep statement. Where does all that depth come from? Are we just pretending it into existence? We just make it up? It's like, then
Yeah.
how in the world did all these people who don't have an internet that can't connect with each other thousands of years ago make the same story? Where is that coming from? Why is human intuition so consistent? Why is it that reality behaves by these patterns that we see that are elemental to storytelling? Like, why is it that story is the primary means of expressing human wisdom from one generation to the next? And now we're risking losing that in the modern world because our grandparents don't talk to the younger children anymore, because the younger children don't think the grandparents have anything useful to offer them, because they don't know how to use a TV or a cell phone, right? And it's like, yeah, that's not exactly the point, guys. Like, there's such a disconnect between generations that I feel like we're risking losing that transmission of wisdom through story, through experience, through that identity sharing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of go back a little bit, to that, well, kind of what you were just generally saying with the relationship between the physical, the metaphysical, there, like you were talking about, there's just this consistent pattern, and C.S. Lewis talks about it, sort of a little bit in The Problem of Pain, where he sort of expresses this strange phenomenon. He approaches it in a very sort of maybe like a cynical way, in that book. But like there's this strange thing going on with human beings that it only happens with human beings and not with the other creatures. I mean, you can argue the other creatures will feel, like horses getting scared for no reason or whatever, and they go crazy. But okay, you can express that, but no, they can't put it to thoughts and make right stuff about it. Only human beings are able to do that. But just this strange phenomenon with human beings of experiencing something other just what we're seeing right in front of us. And then he talks about how this really doesn't make any sense, because what would be, and one of his examples is being afraid of the dead. Like psychoanalysts, talking about, why we fear the dead. And basically the answer is, well, because, we're afraid of the dead. But why? Why are we? Why? And assuredly, he says, assuredly, the least dangerous man is a dead man. He's not going to hurt you, but yet we have this strange, uncanny fear of these kinds of things. Well, why would we have that? It's irrational, and especially in this amount of development of human beings, you'd think that would just go away. That would just, evolutionary wise, that would just kind of disappear. You would think, but we still have this within us. And however, we, each of us may view the way the universe came about, and humanity came about. There's still a simple fact of the matter is this element of humanity never goes away. It sticks with us constantly. And then kind of taking it to sort of the relationship between in storytelling with the Bible, like I was talking about earlier, there is that overarching story of redemption and reconciliation. Yeah, that continuity. Why do the ancients seem to, no matter how strange their stories may be, and even possibly unrelated, there's still an element within those that is the same as the Christian story, in that redemption, that sort of that reconciliation kind of thing, that there's something wrong. There's something wrong with us. And maybe the sun is your hero, and the sun is fighting the darkness for you and stuff like that. And that's what makes good stories is conflict. Every good story has a conflict in it. Every good legend anyway, has a conflict in it, that the character or the characters need to overcome something, and they need to be reconciled to something. And that's exactly what the Christian story is talking about. All the myths and all the legends, when you talk about the old sacrifices offered in the ancient world, where do they get these ideas from? Why do they? And I would argue, again, like you were just talking about with it starts with meaning. And that I would definitely agree with that, is that we are made in the image of God, and we have this inherent, and the author of Ecclesiastes talks about this. He says, you've written eternity on our hearts. God has written in our hearts his image. There's something. Again, we had this relationship with God that was broken in the garden, and as I've been talking with these sister missionaries in the LDS church last couple of weeks and stuff, and I was at this Tuesday I was going over what the Bible is teaching. So again, given the overarching idea of what the Bible is teaching, I was talking about the Garden of Eden, and in the Garden of Eden, our relationship with God was broken. And basically this whole story is about how that gets restored, how that gets fixed in Christ.
And even brought higher. Yeah.
And exactly brought even higher than we had with Adam.
Actually, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I like this is something that I think is actually fundamental to our love for storytelling in general. And I know that you'll see this. Every story has to be a U-shaped story or a decline, right? There's a fall, and then there's a redemption, or there's just the tragedy of the fall. And with the Christian story, what you have is something that Paul puts into words perfectly. This unity, right? That U-shaped story being the starting place of a higher unity, glory to glory. You just go up and up and up, right? And the way that we understand that in like theological language would, let's say, be like the sanctification process. Where I'm brought out of the fall into something like proper humanity, and then brought out of that into something like it's hard to describe without saying something angelic like. Right. You're brought into these almost tiers of reality until you finally are there. It's like, you're going to be at my right hand, whatever that means. You're going to see him as he is because you'll be like him, whatever that means. That is so overwhelming because there isn't a story we can create great enough to represent that high of an ascent. So we have to think about it in tiers, right? Like we have to think about it in progressive stages. That's why, in iconography, it's represented as a ladder. Right? There are steps and rungs that are going up. And as long as you're looking up toward the height and you're not looking down, you're always in a better position. It doesn't matter what rung you're on. Looking up is better than looking down.
Go
ahead.
Tell me the truth. It just mentions theosis. That's kind of what we're talking about a little bit, and Peter talks about this, to be participating in the divine nature. Now, obviously, I would see it differently than Eastern Orthodox people, but the general idea is that, and I was talking about it to a young man at church this last Sunday about, he was showing me one of his favorite verses, abiding in Christ and growing closer to Christ. And when we're doing that, I like to use the example of the trees by a river. Here in Texas, I don't know exactly how it is everywhere else, but here in Texas, we have some pretty standard looking trees. Just cool trees. But if you go to like some of the rivers, the trees there are huge. They're tall. They got these thick, just base areas. And I mean, they're really big. And I was talking to him like, why do you think those trees are so much greater than the other trees? Because they're right by the river. They're right by that stream of life. They're constantly there. And so we need to be like that. We need to be constantly getting closer and closer to that and growing and growing and growing and becoming more than what we are, being better than what we were, especially after Christ saved us. He there's that saying, he accepts us as we are. And that's true, but he doesn't leave us. He doesn't leave us there. He makes us better and better and better. And that's another thing I think is, just to kind of go back to the storytelling element, but is really absent in a lot of stories today is, yes, in a lot of them there's a bit of a redemption arc, but there's still so much in that character that I would like to see redeemed, and that character becoming better and better, a much more just an honorable character. I mean, that's one of my characters. His whole purpose one of his purposes in the story is to see him go from a very dishonored man to a more honorable man, to a more respected man, a man who takes responsibility for his actions and cares for people. And he's less selfish as the story goes. He's much more sacrificial. And that's what I want to see. That's the kind of evolution I want to see in these characters, is just these people who are growing into more than what they were and what we typically see in people. And so I think
they don't grow in those story arcs by way of convenience and ease, do they?
No, no. There's he has to learn a lot of hard lessons and a lot of pain and stuff like that. That
Hmm.
as I know for me personally, I've had to do. In growing in the Lord is realizing, Chase, you gotta make a decision here. Do you want to be more of a man, or you just want to be like this? And it's gonna require more of you. And I'm like, all right, Lord, that's what it's gonna take. There's so much more for me than what this is offering me. That's for sure. And I've discovered that. I've personally discovered that. And but again, yeah, it goes back to that, not just redemption, but becoming something more than what you were before the story
Right.
began.
A real ascension.
Yes.
I like what you said about the trees and the river. Like that to me can speak volumes, like really. Especially if we think about and still have this cosmic image of Eden in my head, kind of just
Yeah.
cramping the space, let's say. But it's like that really is, let's say, life has a greater expression when you're closer to the source,
Exactly.
right? So it's like, why is it that trees that live next to stagnant ponds don't explode in growth that way?
Yeah.
It's because moving water is living water.
Yep.
For a modern person, a scientific mind, that would be like, okay, well, I mean, the nutrients are being carried, crosses across the soil, the minerals, and blah blah blah. Try to explain the how.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
never can touch why,
Hmm.
right? The ancient world didn't care about minerals as much as they did about meaning. And they would say something like, well, living water is living because, well, duh, it comes from on high.
Yeah.
Moving water flows downhill from
Exactly.
above.
Yeah.
So what comes from above can feed and nourish that which goes below, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that providential relationship of reality to, it's just like it always is so baffling and captivating, even for an atheist, to say it, a biologist. You look at life and you see the way that an ecosystem can self-regulate.
Yeah.
Like that is absolutely impressive. Like
Yeah.
on every level, so impressive. And our interference with it can bring it into a higher unity or destroy it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's often we think we're doing something good because we're trying to build ease and convenience for the human person,
Yeah.
but we're not living and coexisting with nature in its own right. The ancient world saw nature as a persona like the sun and the moon, like Mother Nature, let's say. And it's like, well, if we have a reverence for our own mother, right? And the church, let's say, has an insistent reverence for Christ's mother, Mary.
Mm.
Like, if we go even further, Adam, if you want to be so crude as to say, had a mother as he was made from material that came from the earth,
Yeah.
right? And then that identity, that expression, the spirit, that nafesh breathed into him from God. So above and below are combined in
Yeah.
the human person. I think that's so incredible. And it's
Yeah.
like the further we get from the source of that life, that nafesh, the further into death we go. And that's not just to say one day you're going to stop breathing and your body's going to decompose. It's to say actually that when you stop breathing, expressing that nafesh, that spirit, right?
Mm.
The pneuma, which is wind, but it's also
Yeah.
breath, because those are the same thing, right?
Yep.
That's breath. It's wind. It's the same thing. It's the unifying spirit of your person. And guess what happens when I take that unifying spirit out of you? Your body fragments into all its smallest pieces and returns to the earth, right?
Mhm.
Now let's bring that up into something like theology, right? You have the body of Christ.
Yeah.
Christ is the unifying spirit. What would happen should Christ ever remove his unifying spirit from that body?
Yeah.
Oh, friend, it would fragment.
Yeah.
So let's ask the question, because this is something that bothers me. From whence comes our insistence to separate on doctrinal matters and create 1,000 different denominations,
Yeah.
if not the loss of that unity? What was it that we were unifying around before?
Hmm.
And we fragmented away from that, and the body's falling apart. We see it socially, we see
Yeah.
it morally, we see it in sexual categories. It's written across the entire world
Yeah.
that Christianity is fragmenting.
Yeah.
It's like, what do we do about it? You know?
Oh yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, and it's interesting. We had a talk in our church this last Wednesday about something about that The guy, we had a kind of a special guest. He was talking about he's sharing all kinds of passages about unity in the body, and that he's basically telling us, we're all in this together, and you gotta and he may have meant this in a different way than I was seeing it when I was listening to him. Like we got to learn to talk to each other and stuff like that. And the way when I was listening to it, I was thinking, yeah, we got to be able to just step outside of our own little denomination and talk to people of another denomination, and like, and it's no, secret to you. I'm a dirty, rotten, stinking Calvinist, and and you're not, but
I used to be.
I heard, and then I go to a church that's not Reformed, it's not Calvinistic at all. None of the people there, as far as I know, are Calvinistic. Some of them know that I am. My pastor knows that I am, but he's never sees me as a threat because I'm there to just. I don't really care about that. Honestly, I tell people if there's anything I like to be proud about is that I'm the sagest Calvinist. I'm one of the sagest Calvinists you're ever going to meet. I'm never going to make it a big issue. And for me, the main thing is that you are trusting in Christ, the Christ of Scripture, the Son, second person of the triune God, and that you believe in the sufficiency of Scripture. It's God breathed. Things like that are for me, that's the main issue, and that's what we can have those discussions about the other things. But as long as, like you were saying, we're looking up to that one thing, that one source, that as long as we keep that central, it doesn't have to be a big issue. A lot of these differences that we have. I've been out. I've done evangelism with people who weren't Calvinists, and we share the same message.
Successful evangelism at that, probably, huh?
Yeah, and so we don't make it a big issue. We don't tell people to go to this church. It's like trust Christ alone, by faith alone, through grace alone, that kind of stuff. So,
well, let me ask you a question. Do you think that it's possible? And I don't mean to be pejorative. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings or whatever. So just take this with a grain of salt. Do you think it's possible that those people who are more willing to make doctrinal divides something that actually divides, are those people like succumbing to a form of idolatry in thinking that doctrinal stances and, let's say, doctrinal purity or intellectual correctness is God? That's how they're treating it.
I
know they wouldn't say it that way. I'm looking at the way that they behave, the meaning behind their actions and their words.
I think it could. I have a lot of the friends on Facebook who just talk about, all they ever want to talk about is there's no free will, and I'm just like, okay, kind of thing like that. And but I think a lot of them have never really spent a lot of time with believers who are different than them. And I think that when you do that, when you just sort of isolate like that, it's really easy to see people outside your little community as pseudo heretics, and all that stuff. And I used to be like that. I used to think that way as well. And then I started getting to know people who were different than me. Like, again, doing a lot of evangelism stuff, I've had to interact with Christians who were different than me. And I was like, I don't, this is a cool dude. I love talking to this guy. And I know, like I used to be a super hyper cessationist guy, and I'm like, I've literally had a beloved sister in Christ. She's sort of like sometimes she reminds me of my mom. She could almost be my mom sometimes. She'll tell me things she's got to tell me, and and all that stuff. But she literally told me one time, Chase, I'm sensing, because I was going through some tough stuff. She's like, I'm sensing like a demonic thing over you right now. You need to spend a lot of time in prayer. And I was like, you might be right. Something's going on with me. And so, I tell you what, I took her advice. I was praying or reading scripture, and something happened. The Lord just kind of met me, and I was like, wow, she must have been right. She just has this. She has like a mom instinct kind of thing like that. She just looks after us so well. But anyways,
intuition. That's what I was talking about. That intuition, that human.
Exactly.
Reason.
Yeah. And I think that's what I look for more when I talk to other Christians. I want to see, like, has God, and it doesn't have to be the way that I see it, but has God touched this person? Has God really changed this person? And that's what I'm looking for. Like, we can just talk about scripture and just have these. That's somebody who's encountered God. And I'm like, I'm not too bothered by how you see like maybe the end of the world. We may have different eschatologies or different views of baptism. I would just want to, I want to know, have you experienced God, the God of Scripture? Has He touched your heart? Because I know for me, I know I'm not perfect. I can't expect perfection from everybody else that I meet. And when I'm definitely don't meet the bill, I wouldn't even consider myself strictly Reformed confessional. I don't. I've read some of the confessions, but I don't adhere to them completely. So maybe I'm a messy Calvinist. I don't know. It can be in some people's minds, but I think
That
if we
blessed
try to
inconsistency,
a
right?
blessed inconsistency, and I think if we were to just be more focused on, because if we're focused on these divisions, these things that separate us, I think this is why the church is weak right now.
Mhm.
It's incapable, and I understand that there are important issues to talk about, but there is an absolute leviathan rising up right now in America, and if we don't prioritize things and talk about the things that are like really important. And I know a lot of people are going to respond to that, say, well, Chase, soteriology is really important. I get that. But again, if your brother in Christ is proclaiming the same Christ as you and that he's saved by faith alone, just like you, um, just let's keep these conversations private and in good spirit. Let's not make this something for the world to see
Right.
and just split ourselves up from one another. And
Paul
so,
said the same thing about legal disputes in the early church. Stop
yeah,
displaying your dirty laundry to the world. You're being a bad influence.
yeah, you're making us look bad, and so yeah, I think it's really, to go back to the question, a lot of folks, looking at myself, they atomize because they haven't really encountered, they're in these churches that are like super hardcore cessationalism and stuff like that. Like again, all due respect to John MacArthur, it's kind of like they listen to a lot of him, a lot of times, and just, I respect John MacArthur, but when it comes to polemics, I would always tell people, I wouldn't stick to John MacArthur. But they just haven't stepped outside of that little world that they're living in, and just talk to other Christians and learn how to get along with each other. I think that's really important. I mean, I've learned recently about Lutheranism and getting along with Lutherans, and I'm like, I
I
don't
have a
get it.
lot of admiration for Lutheranism. Like one of the first
Yeah.
conversations I had was with Dr. He's doctor now, so I can call him that. Brian Wolfmueller. And
Yeah.
he is like, just to be honest, he's a really cheerful and listenable guy. He's got a very cool radio voice, but he's also really engaging. And you can
Hmm.
tell that he cares about what you're saying when you're talking to him. It's like
Yeah.
that pastoral element of, I'm here with you for
Hmm.
you. Christ is in me here for you. Like
Yeah.
that, I have so much admiration for that. Like that, they have some hard doctrinal stances on their own, but also they try to bring a simplicity to their belief that I really find so enticing. Like, to be honest with you, like they'll say things like,
Hmm.
the bread is the body and the wine is the blood.
Hmm.
Yes. Why? Because Christ said, this is my body and this is my blood. Well,
Hmm.
how? Don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not important. It's not the
Yeah.
point. He
Yeah.
said it is. That equivocation, I say, yep. Like, wow, how simple. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to stop being a symbol, but it doesn't have to be a biological claim either.
Yeah.
It just is. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, just to accept him at his word, like to refrain from seeking certainty and be okay with awe for a minute.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know?
And that kind of brings us back to the subject, of this whole thing is again, when you look at if you look at the Eucharist, and when it relates to the subject, there's a physical element there, but there's something more going on than just the physical. And that's why we can use analogies of the river, the mountains, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And if you're just being physical and material, it's just, again, it's just H2O just going down a mountain and just going, eventually finding either a source of water where it's just swampy or whatever, just stagnant, or it finds its way into the ocean. And the trees, there's nothing. Nobody likes that. Nobody wants to think of reality that way. The simple
Right.
fact of the matter is, these analogies are conveying in the physical world something that goes beyond the physical world.
Right.
And for me, I'm cool with that. If you view the Eucharist in this way, like the Lutheran way, I'll just be honest. I'm kind of, it's not my thing, but again, you're a brother in Christ to me, and God's got it all together. I don't, so I don't need to worry. I don't need to worry about that. I can just be like, hey man, we got the same gospel. We're preaching the same gospel, the same Christ, the same everything, all that stuff. I'm not bothered by it. I don't lose sleep over it. I don't have to go around and just you're all wrong and because of this, that. And I've totally lost interest in doing any of that kind of stuff. I'm trying to focus on the things that are like the cultural issues we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
And why that stuff, like this kind of conversation right now. Like if you were to get me on to talk about, if somebody asked me to come on their program to talk about, hey, let's just talk about the recent, soteriology issues, I'm going to be like, I don't want to get in the middle of that one. Talking about something like this, I think is much more valuable for us right now. And again, it's not to say that truth doesn't matter, but
it's to say truth does matter.
It does matter, but there's an overarching truth, and there's a that we should, like it's. I don't think we should see truth as like just this tiny little thing that you just got to fit through, basically. But like it's sort of like the one in the many. There's a oneness, there's a unity, but there's a many-ness going on in the unity. Sometimes a bit of a mess, but hey, when I talk to some of the LDS missionaries I talk to, I'm like, hey, look, we're us Protestants, we're a bunch of messy folks and stuff, but hey, we when you talk to a Protestant, at least a Protestant who knows what they're talking about, not like a super liberal Protestant, but a Protestant who actually believes in the the sufficiency of Scripture, the deity of Christ, the triune God, the gospel itself. When you talk to one of them, they're going to tell you the same message I'm telling you, no matter if they're Baptist, Presbyterian, Lutheran, non-denominational, whatever it is, they're going to tell you the same message. And they may not tell you in exactly the same way that I would rather tell you, but it's going to be the same message. It's going to always be the same thing, because at the end of the day, the same God that has touched me has touched them also, and has led them on the same. They're coming, going back to the mountain and river analogy. Many rivers come down from those mountains, that high place, and they all eventually. But they may not ever touch, but they come from that same place, and they come from different directions. They go to sometimes different places, but they always come from that same exact source. And so that's the way I try to look at it these days, and not get too caught up in a lot of the polemic stuff, because I think that's damaging us in the long run.
And I think the fractionation that we're seeing in the modern church, continuing the river analogy, is basically like the common source would be the truth of the gospel, right? One of the crazy things is that we've had this conflation going on, and I think this actually has its deficiencies in modern apologetics too, is that truth is higher than fact, and if you don't think so, you have missed the point. There are too many facts for you to concentrate on. Which ones are supposed to be more important? And it's like, truth isn't just something that's confined to facthood either. We're over here talking about rivers, right? A river can divide. How does a river divide? From a stone, right? Well, let's say there's several stones in the river of the church that fractionate it. And though we come from a common source, we're moving further and further away from one another. And it's because we're moving down. Like, you know what I mean? Like, naturally water flows downhill. And it's like, okay, so then let's see this the same way. It's almost as though we're falling. That sounds very familiar to the Christian element too. We're falling away from the source in doing that. We're fractioning away from each other in doing that. And it's like, what if there's somebody responsible for dropping those stones in the river and causing that fraction? Right? Like, would you see them as a friend, an ally? It's like, would you see them as an enemy? Don't Christians believe we have an enemy? Shouldn't we be watching out for stones? Like, I think that there's something that you said that really speaks to me. It's like the church is less effective now because it speaks with that divided tongue. And it's like, especially in the doctrinally aware community, like, we have these people who are more concerned about being corrective than being effective. And it's because they think that their correctness is what gives them the authority to speak. When in fact, it was never that. The authority to speak comes from your unity with the Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be, like having an exceptionally low IQ and be a complete simpleton and have the authority to speak that Christ gives you. And
Mm-hmm.
you've never been a catechumen. You've never been to a seminary. You know what I mean? It's like a lot of people don't realize that there are people who have never been to college who could talk circles around people who have spent their lives in college.
I've never been to college.
I've never been to college. I've never been to a seminary.
Yeah, I've
I'm
never
just
been to
obsessed with
seminary.
learning,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
that's
And like you said, it's like when you learn, here's the thing that I've learned about learning. The more you learn and the more you know, the more you realize that you don't know anything. And you should be
oh
humble enough to assume the person you're talking to knows something you don't, or
yeah.
you will never learn.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I've been so humbled, especially when I started studying church history and just realizing, man, I'm just a blip in the history of the church, and there's just so many of these people who are just so different than me, and I've learned so much from them. Even though we're different, we come from different time and different cultures. But it's just been such a humbling experience to realize, man, there's these guys like they've explained so much of the text that I've never been able to understand. And I was reading some of Augustine on the fall, when Augustine was talking about the fall, and in his book, City of God. I have to go back and read it, but man, I learned so much just from that. But not just that, just talking to other people and just seeing where they're coming from. It's forced me to rethink a lot of things that I just assumed. That I just went, yeah, just these people are all just a bunch of wackos out there in the clouds and stuff like that. And it's been a great experience, and I think it'd be good for a lot of folks, especially in my camp, as it were, to just experience, to just kind of go, just get to know some people who are different than you, like Lutherans, for example.
Yeah.
I didn't really know much about Lutherans. And then I started actually interacting with Lutherans, and I gotta say, man, some of them kind of beat me up over, especially when it's kind of the subject of baptism, like made me go, dude, I got to rethink a lot of this stuff, because man,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with this. So I had to step back and just start really thinking about it. Even though at the end of the day, I don't embrace their views, but I'm like, I've learned a lot from them. I've learned a lot. Just, it's been great. It's a great experience.
This Tell Me the Truth said a comment here that I think is really appropriate. He said the higher fact for the Christian being that truth is ultimately a who and not a what.
Mm-hmm.
That truth is a person, and you can relate to a person. You cannot relate to facts. You cannot
Doctrine.
identify in facts, which is why facts are disconnected from your emotive experience and don't care about your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But persons can. Christ, and here's the cool thing too. Christ didn't become mankind as a generic, generality.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, he became a man. And in doing so, he gave you ability to relate with him and to him in a way that you can't to the abstract of all mankind. Like,
Yeah.
here's the thing. You can hate a generality in a way that you can't hate a single person, which is why when you're looking at a person and you want to hate them, you reduce them to their generalities. You take away all of the individual specificity of that person so that you can hate them.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't love a generality the way that you can love a person.
Mm-hmm.
Christ became a man and says that if we love him, it's like we can love him.
Yeah.
He loves us. That's what personhood provides, is that relational aspect. I think that that's something that's really being missed out on in a lot of communities right now because of this push for this kind of weird identity crisis thing going on in the world, where, if I look at you, I have to see you first through the color of your skin and what genitalia you have.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I have to look at your social class. I have to look at, the beauty or disorganization of your face and features, your fashion expression, whatever kind of shallow thing that we want to associate identity with. But that's not identity. It just isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those are all things that you can use. If you bring the sum of those parts into a unity, you can have an identity. but you can't fragment identity into individual parts.
Yeah.
Pick one part and set it up here as a means to attack the rest. Like, that will never work, and it will always lead to tribalism and war. Always. And it's like, if we can bring a unity back into the church through the expression of the individual, I think that society can really come back to a unity where we see identity as something more than your sexual proclivity or your skin tone or whatever other shallow nonsense we want to put in place of personhood.
It reminds me of Paul, in Galatians, which I'm reading Galatians right now in my daily reading. And I just read that Galatians 3:23, 24, I can just flip it real quick right here. This is right there.
Do it.
Yeah, where he says, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female. You are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise. And exactly, and that's that unifying aspect. And it's not unity to a doctrine of Christ, but it is a unity to the person of Christ.
Yes.
And that also, because as you were talking, I was reminded, like a post I made the other day about characters and stories. Why we don't have iconic characters, or they seem to be dying these days, is because so much of the storytelling today and the sort of wokeness that's been going on is they reduce these characters to being identified by what they are, black, white, male, female, Latino, or something like that. Their sexual sort of orientations, stuff that's what they're being identified with, whether they're strong or weak. These are parts of somebody, but that's not what makes somebody who they are. You have to talk about a human being, who they are. And that's why, again, I think it's really important when you're trying to make good characters that you want to spend time with that character, because you do the same thing with human beings. You don't talk to a human being and you don't identify them based on their gender, their skin color, or anything like that. You get to know this person. You're like, who is this person? They have a name, they have a story behind why they are the way they are, and that's what you want to. That's what makes people memorable. Because this. If it's just about being a woman or something like that, then there's women all over the place. There's nothing super unique about that. I want to know more about this character. What makes this particular woman someone that is interesting and memorable, or what makes this particular guy someone who's interesting and memorable? Like my favorite example of a character introduction is always Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean. When he's first introduced, I mean, that's just a legendary introduction to his character. It's just it's perfect. And he's such an iconic movies of Jack Sparrow. We hated it. I hated it anyway. I hated the last couple of movies of the Pirates of the Caribbean, because I'm like, that's not Jack Sparrow. Because he's so iconic that this is not right. This isn't the person that I knew, that I got to know and stuff. And so that personhood is extremely important. It goes beyond the simple facts and the simple physical stuff that you see, and the reduction and Lord forbid that we reduce human beings to just this, that, the other thing. And just like in the body, we reduce each other to just your denomination, and your doctrinal stances and stuff like that. These are real people. Problem. These are real people who, I mean, I've had people, again, my church, there's a particular eschatology, sort of like the dispensationalism that's prevalent in my church. I don't hold to that eschatology, but I've had people who know that I don't in my church ask me, Chase, how come, what's with these people who see this? Because they know that I'm not in that little box. I've explored the different eschatologies and stuff like that. And I've always been, because they come to me like so confused and I just don't understand how these people, I'm like, well, have you ever actually tried to talk to one of them, and just try to understand how they see things. And I try to explain to them as best I can, because I don't hold to all of them, but I try my best to explain, this is why they see it this way. This is the reason why, and not just say that this is, again, not just talk about the doctrine itself, but like why they're motivated to see things the way they do, and to
Right.
hopefully help people understand like there's more to it than just the doctrine itself. There's more going on there. It's much more complex, you know, and so it's more
And
than
I
just
agree.
yeah.
I think the fact that we try to reduce everything and take its complexity away so that we can bring it down into like this subcategory, we simplify the world. It's like we're going to do that. Like we have to do that.
Mhm.
But then you're not doing yourself any favors with identity and personhood
Yeah.
to do that to yourself, let's say, right? Which is why I think that there's an issue, like you just said, with doctrinal stances and people dismissing one another because of doctrinal stances, and
Mhm.
especially people who have never actually investigated alternative views to what it is that they hold to. Like, how are you going to be so bold as to say, I disagree before you ever say, I understand?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And then in the political world, we have things like I said, skin pigment and genitalia and sexual orientation. That's the trinity of the politic world right now. And
Mhm.
it's like,
Yeah.
if you take any one of those things, these arbitrary categories, and you say, this is the most important thing, and I'm going to use it as a high ground by which I can attack all other identities, you're not doing yourself or anybody else any favors by doing that. And to be honest with you, I can see and understand why somebody who's been let's say, propagandized to think that way,
Yeah.
sees their sexual orientation as equivocal to their identity. And if you say, no, I don't agree with your sexual proclivity, I think that that's wrong and you should change your mind, or I think you're right and I affirm that, it's like, well, that's now you're saying that my identity is true or false. I'm saying,
Mhm.
no, I don't think your identity is latched to that at all. And I think you're much more than that. And I hope that
Mm.
you would learn to know that you're much more than that.
Yeah.
I'm much more than a white guy with a beard.
Mhm.
Yes, I look like a white guy. I'm dark white. That's what I say. Irish cream. I have a beard. It's like, yeah, that's cool. If I cut my beard off, I might change my physical appearance to you, but I don't change my personhood.
Yeah.
And if we can't make those kinds of distinctions, we're going to we're going to fall into something much more like chaos than anything else I could describe it as.
Mhm.
Where there's no way of knowing the person.
Mhm.
You have to simply prejudicially expect something of them because of some arbitrary category you drop them in, you
Mhm.
know. And it's like that kind of arbitrary category assignment is exactly what made the Holocaust possible.
Yeah.
I can punish you and blame you and drop on you all of the qualities of villainy and and deserving of extermination that I want, because I can reduce you to this category. Again, you can't hate a person the way that you hate a generality. And so if you
Mhm.
take away all of the individual persona of the person, you can genuinely hate them in a way that you really couldn't if you left them as that unity of the sub parts of their person, like these
Mhm.
arbitrary categories. Yeah, your sexuality does play a role in informing who you are as that unity, but your sexual orientation isn't the unity.
Mhm.
It's like
Yeah.
a small percentage of what makes up that unity, and its loss is not the loss of you, right?
Yeah.
Your skin tone is not the loss of you, right? Like, and this is something that bothers me a lot because I live in a community and I even work in a place where I'm honestly a rather minority type character.
Mhm.
I don't work in a neighborhood that's like, you know, affluent and full of, you know, people who all look the same.
Yeah.
That's not where I work. It's not where I live. I live in the Bay Area where it's exceptionally diverse. There's lots of different faith walks, there's lots of different kinds of people, there's lots of different, well, maybe not as much diversity in the political world, but there's plenty of diversity of other sorts where I come from. And I've never been able to identify personally with confining somebody to one or another of those categories and saying, aha, now I have you pegged down and I don't have to listen to anything more that you say
Mhm.
because you're confined to this category and this category is this way. I
Mhm.
think that that's so, like, that's the opposite of useful, right? And the fact that that rears its head in every facet of human interaction, you know, political, theological, social, moral, all of these different things that all these interactions we have are characterized by this swing between extremes, right? And it's like, I feel like that's Satan's favorite game is this pendulum swing,
Mhm.
you know. And if he can get us, if he can get humanity not only separated from the source, right,
Mhm.
but separated from one another, we become so much more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And um, that unity is of not just, again, not what we are, as Tell Me the Truth was talking about, but who we
Mm,
are, ultimately. And because when we talk about, again, if we just talk, it's very easy to atomize if we just stick to the plain face ideas that we, that much of our world subscribes to, is a very materialistic view. And so
mhm.
it's very easy, and kind of like we were talking about at the very beginning, is our worldview it will affect us more than we sometimes tend to think it will. So if
Right.
you have a materialistic worldview where you basically everything is just kind of made up of parts, it's very easy to then begin to see that in other people, and not see them in a as a whole of the whole of humanity made in the image of God, but just like he's this that whatever, or she is this, she is that, kind of thing like that. um, and just sort of see them as the things that sort of help us like about what they are, and she's a Democrat or he's a Republican, and then just sort of split them up based on that, rather than and those aren't, I'm not saying those aren't important, but there is something that we are collectively. And I think honestly, the church can, when it comes to the wokeness stuff, can it that is a perfect answer to provide for that. Is that what I just read in Galatians right there? Is that racism? Yes, it's been part of our history. How do we fix that stuff? How do you fix that? We don't fix it by scratching at scars and stuff. We fix it by recognizing um, that my black neighbor with me is made in the image of God, and he needs to be reconciled to God just like I do. And so let's come alongside each other and help each other do that, and look past and learn uh, to to heal, I guess, is a good word. I'm trying to be careful with my words. I don't want to talk about things like, well, just kind of get over it, kind of thing, that,
Right.
all that stuff. Obviously, it's you don't want to just, especially if somebody was dealing with trauma, that's not something you want to tell them. But the way I always like to describe it is when I talk about, like when I've lost family members or something like that, that's really tough on me. It's not so much you move on from that, you just sort of learn to live with it. It just kind of, you just, it just becomes more and more easier to live with, I guess, as you grow up. That's what healing really is.
Integrating. Yeah.
Yeah, the scars, they don't, the wounds don't go away, but the scars remain. And I think that's a great way to look at it. And and then again, the Christian answer to these issues, we have the answers. They're right there, to all of our societal problems, our cultural problems. It's all in the Christian worldview. And so if we just look at things in that very materialistic world, it's like into little bits and pieces and classes and stuff like that. And but at the same time, I do think it's also really important that we also, again, that there's a balance that we need to have with the one and the many. If we get,
Mhm.
sometimes I think honestly that diversity is good for us. It's
It
really good
is.
for us because again, you learn a lot. There could be something that I'm weak in when it comes to theology, that my brother who's in a different kind of denomination or whatever group, that's more stronger in, and help me see and go, oh, I need to, I need to fix that,
Yeah.
and so if we look at it that way, and that's unfortunately not the way a lot of Christians look at it. We don't look at it as iron sharpening iron. We look at it as, this guy is, I gotta get this guy, kind of thing like that, because we reduce him to a doctrine and just attack that, and that's an issue. When I have an issue with somebody, I try to just be, hey, I have a little bit of concern here, and like, here's my concern, my genuine concern. And if they explain it to me, everything, I'll go, okay, well, that I guess that explains that, or there needs to be a little bit more context. But anyways, um, that diversity is also a really good thing. It's really important for us because a diversity. I've read this book. I haven't finished it, but I've read this book from R.J. Rushdoony, and whatever you might think about his eschatology, but it's a great book. It's a great book because it's the one in the many, and it like blew my mind. He talks about this. He goes through the history of philosophers and how they try to deal with this issue, and how the Christian worldview has the solution to this, again, because our God is one in many. But but the point being made is that if you have too much diversity, chaos. But if you have too much unity, or like you've emphasized too much of that oneness, then the individual identities of people, who they are, again, disappears as well. It goes away. And so, like, there's a movie, I was thinking about this the other day, and again, I might catch some flack for this, but V Vendetta as a movie that I actually don't really like, because I think it sort of conveys that same problem with all the people. And I get the point that it's making, but I think, again, there could be a misinterpretation of what the point it was trying to make. Because at the end, the whole idea is to rise up against the state and its oppression, its tyranny. That's great. I'm all for that. But the people, they all have the Guy Fawkes masks, and they all look the same. And I felt like, that's conveying an identity crisis right there, where they're identifying with an idea rather than just being you, and that finding that unity within yourselves. And I think that dangerous problem happened in Germany. The people, they were so atomized, but they found an identity that Hitler provided for them, and latched onto that. And so their own identities, they went wrong in the opposite direction. And so I think it's really important for us to, like, we got to find that balance between the material and the metaphysical, the spiritual, and the material or the physical. It's really important for Christians to really think through these things, that the physical world isn't all there is. But if we get so attached to the reality that the physical world isn't all there is, we may just be so far up in the clouds that we make no, the physical world doesn't matter anymore. We adopt ideas to where it's just about, getting to heaven, and that's it. And that's, our impact in this world doesn't really mean anything. Right. And so we need, it's really important.
Like a Christian nihilism. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, the pendulum swinging, in this case, we want the pendulum to be really nice and balanced, rather than just this imbalance going back and forth and back and forth. And the Trinitarian heresies arose because of this. When it came to, I know I'm rambling on, but I'll just end with this example. But when it came to, like, the issues going on with the Trinity, there's this guy Sibelius, who had too much emphasis on the oneness of God, and ended up making the persons sort of just nothing. They don't really mean anything. They're just sort of modes or parts of God. But if you went too far into the Arian way, you ended up separating the Son from God the Father as a creation of God the Father, and we don't want to do that. So the church found that middle road, that balance between the one and the many, that we want to say that there's one God, there's three persons in the one God, they're all distinct from one another, there's a diversity in God, but there's still the oneness in God, and that there's that balance, that perfect. As Christians, again, these are subjects, things. When I had my little program that I was doing, again, when I was trying to do my own little podcast, which is really difficult to do, I called it Finding the Balance, because it's really about trying to find that balance, that right balance between everything. And the physical is important, immaterial is important, but you never want them to sort of overshadow each other. They have to be held in a perfect balance, and the Christian worldview has that perfect balance to offer. So that's a long-winded little thing there, but yeah.
No, I think that all of that was very appropriate, actually. And I like the fact that you brought up the V for Vendetta story in the way that it kind of archetypally represents an excess of order, and its antidote is a rightful agent of chaos, that right rebel. And the people that are in a stagnant unity, that tyranny, right? Like where the individual is now a cog or a wheel. Their identity was destroyed in that, which is why the excess of order became something completely intolerable. It was like the antidote to that was finding a common unity outside of the governmental tyranny in that rebellion. right? And the reason why, and I think the reason why it bothered you in your intuition is noticing that in the modern world, what we're doing is latching onto ideologies and creating totalitarian states.
Yeah.
And that's that excess of order. But then you can also in that state, you're going to latch on to something that is like, okay, the structure has become too fragile because it's become like calcified, like old bones, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's aging and it's becoming stagnant. It no longer grows. It no longer lives. It's not a living unity. The tyranny is a dead thing,
Yeah.
right? And it's like being ruled over by death. And it's like that rebel becomes like a spark that can bring something back. And so they identify with that. And in that story, they're all sharing that identity as the rightful rebel, right? That's what they're doing. But the fact that like you said, it's like that's too shallow of a unity. Yeah, it works in that story, which it does. It does work.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that can elicit great emotion because of the way that they do it and the rising of the music that was forbidden and all of those things. It's like, but there's a story that runs parallel to that goes to the opposite end, and it's in a world where everything is chaotic and all the proper categories have broken down and everything's fallen apart, right? It's like the opposite of excess of order with that tyranny. The opposite of tyranny is just utter chaos and rebellion. We have plenty of stories about that too. What Mad Max and all these different desert apocalyptic kind of stories where everything is broken down and all you have is the individual to rule themselves, pure anarchy, right? And it's like, what happens in those stories? They still need a unity. They still need something to bind them together.
Some kind of order.
Right. And so it's like I think and Christians may have gotten this wrong at some point in the past too, is thinking about order and chaos as something like good and evil, rather than thinking them as neutral categories by which you can have that pendulum swinging, right? And it kind of passes back and forth between the two. But found in each one is their antidote, right? In an excess of order, the hero is the rebel. In the excess of chaos, the hero is like that strong-willed, harsh almost kind of character that can draw people into himself and bring order back to things, right? And it's like what brings to my mind is the episode in Exodus where the people are in tyranny in Egypt, in excess of order, and then they leave there. They go through death, through the Red Sea. It's a symbol of baptism. And they come out on the other side in a wilderness, which is an excess of chaos. They have no ruler. They have no law. They have no place. They have no food, and they're running out of water. And it's like everything's broken down. Where is our unity? Where is our unity? I don't think it's an accident that God gave the law to Moses during the wilderness adventure.
Yeah. Yeah.
The law is that antidote to that breakdown of everything. You know what I mean? It's like, why did God give Noah an ark? Because a flood was coming. You know, it's like all of these things, God grants us the providence and tools necessary to deal with what's at hand. And that human intuition to reach forward is to notice the problem and be looking for that solution rather than just to allow it to kind of wash over you and overtake you like a wave.
Yeah. And to kind of go back to the V for Vendetta thing real quick, I was just thinking as you were kind of explaining a lot of that, it would have been cool. I know that most people, most people who watch the movie don't think about a lot of things I think about, you know? So I could be seeing more into it than I probably should be. But like, it would be cool for me. I would think, you know, you got the Guy Fawkes masks, but they're all a little bit different. You know, they all have their own unique sort of paintings on them, whatever like that. You know, just to sort of represent that, hey, to identify that at the same time, we're all identifying with the same thing, but yet we're all still individuals and unique in our own ways. I think that would be kind of cool.
Unity and diversity.
Unity and diversity. That's so important. And again, just the Christian worldview has that like central in it. And that central element that no other worldview can explain. So sorry, but it's you know, also kind of what you were talking about with that the chaos and that order, and again, that's stuff the Christian worldview offers. And I like to say, in my view, that because the Christian worldview was important to the founding of this country, that's a lot in ways the kind of system we have. We have a federal government, but we also still have individual states and states' rights and stuff like that.
Dual federalism,
yeah, and in our government itself, there's the distribution of power is split. It's distributed. Is to prevent us from getting so, like, again, to prevent that the oneness from taking over, but also the law and order to prevent chaos from ensuing. These are really important elements that are true for that, but also true for when it comes to how we should view ourselves. I am a physical being. I have physical parts about me that make me the physical person that I am, but I'm more than that. I'm much more than just the physical makeup that I am. The universe itself is more than the physical makeup that it is. There's something beyond that. If you have a worldview that's imbalanced and you go too far into one, you go too far into the spiritual, you just sort of, it's really kind of, you end up with a dualism and like a Gnosticism kind of concept going on. And as Christians, we don't want to do that. We don't want to view ourselves like that. The early church was like adamantly against the Gnostics and the Docetists who came before them. John is arguing against them in his letters. Anybody who denies that the Son and the,
he calls them Antichrist. Yeah.
Calls them Antichrist because they rejected the physical, material human being of Jesus, the Christ, who is the God, the Son. They rejected all of that, and so we have to. Christ, again, what were they arguing against, the Gnostics and all that the physical world was bad, so therefore the deity would never come into the physical world. He just sort of like appeared like he was, but he wasn't really here, kind of stuff like that. And the Christian worldview rejects that. And the reason why the Christian worldview rejects that is because the physical world is important. And that's what God is redeeming. He's redeeming the physical world. But it's not just that, and that's where a lot of Christians, I think, today just have a they need to think more about this and recognize we don't have to have this dichotomy going on, this dualism. Dualism is opposed to the Christian worldview. We don't want to see it like that. We don't want to see this like, I don't like those paintings of Jesus in an arm wrestling match with the devil. That's not, I see that. Yeah, there's a big problem with that. That's not how we want to view these kinds of things. God's always in control. But that's what God is doing is redeeming everything, not just the physical, not just the spirit, but everything. And so anyways, it's really important for us as Christians to recognize that. And real quick here, just on when I take it back to the story writing, kind of what we were mentioning when we were talking about this, is that in my story, magic, there's the world of magic in there, but as time progresses, there's going to be scientific discoveries that sort of reveal that, hey, there's more science, there's science to this magic, quote unquote, right? And so some people are going to see that as, hey, there's really no such thing as magic. They're going to interpret the progress of science as dispelling all the divine and spiritual elements and stuff like that. And part of what I'm trying to do is sort of make compelling cases for that, because again, I don't want to have my sort of I have like atheistic kind of characters in the story, but I don't want them to be inauthentic. I don't want them to be cartoon characters of like atheistic views. I want them to be authentic people who believe what they believe and why they believe what they believe, kind of like that. But again, so the sort of as science progresses, there's a naturalism that's in this world, and they start thinking, well, what if we don't need a lot of this deity stuff? But even though, so the point is that does the progress of science prove that the spiritual metaphysical world doesn't exist? And my argument, of course, is no, it doesn't, and that the physical world is sort of a you could say catalyst to something further, more deeper than that. And you can see that based on how you see that you don't just see the physical world. Nobody wants to just see the physical world. They want to see meaning and purpose in the world. Everybody was talking about that because of that. But that stuff isn't physical. That stuff isn't meaning and purpose is not the trees. It's not the rivers. It's something that it's hard to describe because it's there, but you can't really explain exactly how it's there, but it's there, so that's kind of what I try to convey in the stories, my storytelling.
Yeah, and it makes sense to do so because there really is like there's a need for it. There's a need for people to realize that there's a cost to disenchanting reality. There's a cost when you drop all of those things that are behind the material world and you think that there's only the visible world and you pretend away the invisible world. There's a loss. There really is, and it's a real loss. Just like that fall away from the garden was a real loss. And often I don't think we realize the gravity of that because we don't know what it is we lost.
Yeah.
I'm so pleased. Thank you for coming on here and talking with me, man. This is awesome. We just passed the 2-hour mark. I think it's probably a good time to cut it off. I wouldn't mind if you wanted to come on and talk about some of this stuff again. Maybe we'll get 1 or 2 other guys on here and we'll have a roundtable discussion about story and the depth of this and maybe talk about how, the physical world is more like a symbol than anything else because the metaphysical world is actually in some sense more real and informs the material world. I think that has primacy in a way because, God being the invisible God creating reality speaks directly to the fact that the invisible world is primary and my body is a symbol of my soul, not the opposite way.
Yeah.
So I'm very pleased with how this went. Do you have anything that you want to plug? You got any blog, or are you going to use your YouTube channel? I put the link for your description for your YouTube in the description. If you want to give any kind of closing thoughts or whatever.
Not much other than just, if you want to, I talk a lot about my story writing. If you want to check that out, I have a website, mastersofveildraund.com. It's where I literally post chapters to my story up there. You can read them for free. It doesn't cost you anything. If you can buy the book if you want, that's always a big help, but you don't have to. You can just read it for free right there. I do it pretty much everything by myself. It's all just me doing it. I just finished doing Master Gears right now, so it's going to be a while before I post new stuff because I gotta my next book's still in beta phase, so I'm still working on getting that all nice and good before I release that. But I release them periodically, kind of like episodically, you might say, every Saturday. So
that's probably better. I wish more people would do that.
Yeah, so you don't feel like overwhelmed, like I got to read all this stuff. You can just read one chapter at a time, and there you go. So, and then hopefully if you like it, you're like, I can't wait for the next one. I hope that's what's happening with folks. But anyways, you can check that out.
Send me a link of your where you post those things, and I'll add it in the description also, so people can get more familiar with your book. And I'll put the link for your book on Amazon in the description also.
Absolutely,
I'd like to help you out with that. But
sure, yeah, man, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, bro. I really appreciate it. I am so blessed. This has been a blast for me. A great way to spend my Saturday morning, and I'm so blessed, man. I thank you very much, and I am very excited for the people that have stuck out with us. Tell me the truth. Thank you. If you haven't liked and subscribed to the channel, please do. I'm just blessed that you'd stick with us for the long haul, man. That's a great compliment. Thanks for your time and attention.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for all your input. This has been really great. Like, this went better than I wanted. Like, I'm really blessed. Anybody who's listening to this, you like the content, like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave me comments. I do read them. I'll interact with you. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, if we could have been clearer on anything, or if you have any thoughts, if you have any ideas that you'd like to see us discuss on a show in future, let me know. I really want to interact with the audience. I love doing this, and I like talking. I love people, and I'd like to interact with you guys. So go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments down below. And thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been the Complete Sinner's Guide. And in the spirit of my brother, Tyler Fowler, good day, God bless, and stay like Christ.
Amen.